Brilliant, we're live. Okay, hello everyone. My name is Lucy and I am doing a live session today for the brilliant Roxy the zoologist. Now the subject of my talk and what I'm just going to ramble to you about is obviously in the title just there, so Warty Diaries, the secret life of toads, which is quite a geeky subject about quite an ugly little critter that I've absolutely fallen in love with in the last couple of years. Now, first of all, I'll do a little bit of an introduction to myself, and then we'll go into a chat about basically covering just what are toads, what do they do, what do they get up to, why they're cool, why they're weird, and then a little bit about their conservation, the issues they're facing in the UK, and how you guys can get involved to help them out. So my name's Lucy, Lucy Hodson. I go by Lucy Lapwing on all my social media. I work in conservation, and outside of work I just basically do my wildlife blogging. So I just spend all of my spare time rooting around outside, looking for wildlife, trying to find cool stuff, take very amateur average photos of it, and then just write stuff about it. I'm really into science communication, wildlife communication. I like taking complex topics about wildlife and scientific processes and just turning it into real human talk and making it understandable. So I'm really passionate about how cool wildlife is, and I think if we can translate it to a lot of people, we can get more people to care about it and hopefully take action to help it. So now, as well as working in conservation, I do quite a lot of volunteering in my spare time as well, mostly because I'm a nerd, but secondly, I just like contributing back to conservation, helping out with loads of really exciting projects, and it's the best way to learn things as well. You meet some really, really cool people with like loads of wildlife knowledge, and they help teach you about stuff. So that's really good. So we're going to go into toads today. Now, the species I'm going to talk about is the common toad. So bufo, which has to be one of the best Latin names in the animal world, I think. Bufo, common toad. In the UK, we have a number of herps, as they're called, so amphibians and reptiles. If you're looking at your reptiles, we have 3 native species of snake and 3 technically native species of lizards. So there's a couple of organisations, a couple of NGOs that I'm going to mention in this, not because I'm in any way affiliated with them. I'm just a volunteer and I think what they do is really cool. So one of them is Frog Life, who do a lot of really cool stuff around amphibians. And the other one is ARC, which is the Amphibian and Reptile Conservation Trust. Both of them have ACE websites, so check them out. Loads of information on there. And we'll do a quick summary of what UK species, amphibians and reptiles we've got. But if you want to go into it in more detail, they have a really good free identification chart that you can download. So this is it. And it tells you how to tell the difference between what's that lizard, what's that snake, what's that frog, what's that newt, what's that toad. So yeah, in the UK, lizards, if you're looking at lizards, we have 3 species. So we have the common lizard, which you find in quite like dry heathlandy areas, brown, beautiful. There's the much rarer sand lizard, which is the males are this vivid lime green. They're absolutely gorgeous. I've only ever seen one once, and they're restricted to, I think it's less than 20 sites in the UK. They need like a really specialist sand dune habitat. There's a lot of amazing conservation work going on to save those guys. And then there's another one which doesn't look like a lizard, but it is. It's the slow worm. Now, I've never seen one of these. It's my bogey beast. I know lots of you've seen them, and I'm endlessly jealous. They are a legless lizard. So even though they look like a snake, they are a lizard. And they've got a cheeky little grin, a little smile. Beautiful little things. I can't wait till the day I see one. And then if you get into snakes, if you like your snakes, we've got adders, grass snakes and smooth snakes. The smooth snakes are the most restricted out of all of those. Adders like dry heathlandy places again, and grass snakes tend to be near sources of water, and they're really cool. The adder is venomous. It can technically kill you, but more if you're bitten by it and then sit around doing nothing for a week, you might die. Or if you have like a severe allergic reaction, but they're generally not lethal. And bites from them are very, very rare. It takes you pretty much sticking your finger in its mouth to get a bite. Amphibians, we've got frogs. Now we have 2 native species of frogs in the UK, and then some weird and wonderful escapees. The native ones are the common one, which is the one you're most likely to encounter, and then another much rarer one called the pool frog. And then toads. Oh no, newts. We'll go to newts. Newts are obviously like little wet amphibious lizards. They're gorgeous. And we have 3 native species of those in the UK. We have the smooth newt, the palmate newt, which are quite visually similar. And then we have the really sexy great crested newt, which is the big warty dark one. All beautiful. And then toads. Sorry, I keep jumping ahead to toads. So toads, we have 2 native species in the UK. The natterjack, again, really, really rare. It likes ponds on sand dune areas. Again, it's really fussy and specialist. And you can identify that by a stripe down its back. And then the common toad, which is the star of the show today, Bufo Bufo. So toads, I mean, I'd always loved them as a kid. I just always think they're just brilliant animals. But I would have always said I preferred a frog until I started volunteering with toads. And now I'm just in love with these little critters. So they have a fascinating life cycle. They're quite similar to frogs. So frogs tend to emerge earliest each year. I'm sure you've all seen some nice big globs of frog spawn in your ponds near you. Toads tend to have their breeding season just after frogs, so they don't interact. And there are cases where they overlap, where frogs try to mate with toads, and it's all hilarious. But yeah, toads tend to come along secondly. So I have got some photos in my lovely toad folder. Let me just have a look. Now, if you're looking at a toad, just to identify them, first of all, is probably the best thing. I'll get this photo up nice and big on my screen. If you take a look at the little furrows, first of all, the cutest thing ever, cuter than puppies. Look at that gorgeous copper golden eye and that oval eye. That's a really nice indicator of a toad, so golden-eyed toad. And you can also see from there his skin, or her skin, I should say, this is a female, is really quite warty. So even though she's wet there because I've just dragged her out of a brook against her will, she is much wartier than a frog. So conveniently last year I did, on the same night, find a frog and a toad next to each other. So I can show you the difference between the two. There you go. So this one, I can't tell left and right in reverse. This one's the toad and the other one's the frog. So you can see this guy is really quite warty. The frog, if you look a little bit closer, has still got metallic eyes, but they're not quite that golden colour. And they have this much smoother skin and like this mask behind the eye, this like disc shape here. So that's how you can tell it's a frog. Frogs are a lot more active. If you see a frog, they're going to kick off. They're going to try and hop away. They lose their minds and start going, ah! Toads are really, really slow, and they don't tend to hop. They tend to crawl really, really slowly. They're not in any rush to get away. And then frogs have got much more dramatically webbed feet and hands as well. They're really, really long toes, really big webs in between, whereas toads are only like slightly webbed. So that's how to tell the difference. Toads, you can actually very often tell the difference between a male and a female. Now that one I showed you just there with the beautiful eye, that was a female, and that's because she's chunky. She's really big. So the females can be significantly larger than the males. I think the largest female recorded was like 15 centimeters. Oh, you can see my reflection there, sorry. So you can see this is a pair in the mating position. Now they're not mating yet, and mating actually takes place outside of the body of a toad. So the female will lay her spawn, and the male will fertilize it basically as she lays it. So he's just sat there waiting for her to do her thing. Now toads, fascinating in their breeding cycle in that they're migratory. So a population of toads will return to the same ponds, the same ancestral breeding ponds, year after year after year. And it's built within their navigation and their physical being to return to that spot. So they've done experiments where they've taken a toad more than 2 miles away from where its breeding pond is, and it still finds its way back. They've just got this magnetic mental thing that just is like pond that way. So that's what they do. So when it comes to breeding season, toads spend a lot less time in water than in comparison to frogs, but all amphibians spend less time in water than you'd think. Toads are much more able to withstand drier conditions than frogs. So they'll live out in the woods. They'll spend the winter months hibernating. Late of summer, even a bit of autumn, they'll just be chilling out in the woods under a rock, under some roots, under some leaves. They'll have a little den that they'll return to each day, and each night they'll go out and just look for some nice tasty bugs to crunch. So they eat all sorts of things like woodlice and beetles and whatever little critters they can find. But yeah, when it comes to mating season, something just switches, and in early March, they just get mentally told that it's sexy time and it's time to go and find a mate. So they all en masse on the first few warm nights of March will start moving back to that ancestral breeding pond. And it's often quite deep water that they go to, so farm ponds, big deep mill ponds, that type of thing. And those first few rainy, still, warm nights of March, you'll suddenly get mass movement of toads, which we'll come to later. So quite often you can imagine if there's huge numbers of toads all moving towards the same direction, a male will encounter a female, and rather than him march all the way to the pond himself, he thinks, all right, I'll get an easy ride. And so he latches onto her and forms this position. So this, in frogs of toads, this position is called amplexus. Amplexus. Which is a very satisfying word to say. And they've got very, very, very strong forearms. In fact, I think I've got a little video here. Turn the sound on so it doesn't shout at you. So sometimes when you pick up a toad, this is a male that's gone into amplexus with my hand, and he just will not let go. So he's latched onto my fingers there, and if I turn him over, you can see those little hands, and he's just gripping on for dear life. He thinks I'm a lady toad. Yeah, I don't know if anybody's ever held a toad before, but for the life of you, you cannot get him off. It feels like you're going to snap the little arm. They're so, so strong. So if he encounters a lady toad in the woods, he'll latch on and not want to let go for the life of him. And she'll end up carrying him. It can often be half a mile to a mile, all the way back to this pond with him on her back. So what else have we not covered about their breeding cycle? Oh, yeah. So this is the best bit. So often the males will emerge slightly before the females, and they'll get ready and wait for one to latch onto. One of the first nights that the females start emerging, often the females are outnumbered by lots of males. So all the males will just rush at it, and they're all trying to lock into that amplexus position to get in, get ready for a spawning. So you'll sometimes encounter what is known as a mating ball or a toad ball. And it's basically a big writhing ball of, I don't know, 5-10 toads all locked together. Sometimes they can even kill the female. It gets a little bit brutal, but often she just kind of sits there going, ah, what's going on? With a million males on her back. So that's always fun to watch. Yeah, and eventually the toads will get to the breeding pond. They'll spawn in their masses. Now their spawn doesn't look like frog spawn, and very conveniently, again last year, I came across a beautiful glob of frog spawn next to some toad spawn in a pond. So you have a look in here. This white stuff here is the frog spawn. I'm sure you recognise, but I don't know if you can see here on the outside of the screen. Those little ladders, those little rows of dots. And so the way they spawn is just in these strings, and it'll be 2 rows of eggs. Really, really neat. Much more patternful than frog spawn. So you get these big strings waving all throughout the pond of this toad spawn. It's beautiful. It's not often you see them side by side like that, so I was chuffed with that. And yeah, so they'll sit in the pond. They'll be there for a week. They'll breed, get down to business, and then they return back to spend the rest of the summer and spring in the woods, just eating bugs. It's pretty cool. So yeah, that's what toads have done for thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands, millions of years of their evolution, and they've been fine until humans have come along. Now in recent years, in the past 30 years since this has been really heavily recorded, toads have declined by 68%. So 30 years, 68%, massive decline. There was one estimate at one point that up to 20 tons of them are squashed on our roads every year, and that gives you a big clue as to one of the biggest causes of their decline. So as human development's increased over the years, all of those migration routes are being intersected by roads and development. Many ponds are being filled in as well. We're losing a lot of our ponds, so there's not as many ponds for them to go to, and that ancestral breeding is so built in that if they come back 1 year and the pond's gone, they just got nowhere to breed. And then the roads as well, the fact that these toads are slow, like I said, they can't hop, they can't get out of the way, they're not very reactive. They're moving at night, and because they're moving in early spring, it's often still cold, even though it's one of the first warmer nights. We're only talking about 8, 9, 10 degrees. So yeah, they move really, really slow, can't get out of the way of cars. You've got a toad pancake. So the wonderful, wonderful chaps at Frog Life and Amphibian and Reptile Conservation Trust have for years been setting up these patrols, toad patrols. And it's groups of volunteers who go to areas where there's known toad crossings, so areas where that migration route intersects the road. And they'll keep an eye out every evening in those first few weeks of March, go down to the road with, you've got like your toad kit, so you have a bucket, you have a torch, you have a head torch if you're posh, some high vis, some cool signs with toads on, some gloves, and you basically patrol an area of road waiting for these toads to cross. The traffic hopefully slows down, but it doesn't always. People can be really mean. And you basically scoop up any toads that you find, put them in a bucket and transport them to their pond. So it's human intervention, but you will save a huge number of toads compared to the ones that get squashed. So I've been doing my toad patrol now for 3 years, and it's absolutely brilliant. It's so much better than just sat in every night watching TV. Now, obviously, I have to say at the moment with the social distancing guidelines, toad patrol and everything is on pause. We're just about getting to the end of the season anyway, because it's getting warm and they pretty much finished breeding now. But yeah, because of coronavirus, we can't be doing it because we're interacting with each other and it's just too risky and it's non-essential. Although toads, yeah, but it's non-essential. So I've not been able to do it for the last couple of weeks, but I did manage to get 2 weeks in before we went into lockdown this year. So last year we saved over 900 toads on our road, and in a single night, if we're not there, you can lose over 100. So it gives you a really good idea. Toads only start breeding in their 2nd or 3rd year of age, and they can live a long time. Wise old toads. In the wild, they can live, 12, 15 years, but in captivity, they've had ones that live like 50. Can you imagine? Like a toad could be older than like your mum and dad. They're amazing little things. But you can imagine, so if 1 year 100 toads of breeding age get wiped out, that's a huge dent in the population, and all those young ones that perhaps survive, it's going to take them a couple of years to catch up to start replenishing that population. So yeah, it's really sad. So this year I have actually been involved in a little bit of research that Amphibian and Reptile Conservation have teamed up with some researchers at Wolverhampton Uni, and I think possibly Salford Uni, another uni. I'll have to check that, to test why this decline's happening. We obviously know they're being squashed, and we know ponds are being filled in, but we're also doing some genetic studies as well. So this year I've been grabbing toads in my hand with gloves on and taking a little swab in their mouth to get a genetic sample, which we're sending off to them as well. So it's all very interesting. If you want to have a go at toad patrol, obviously we hope next year will be a different story to this. Frog Life, again, that other brilliant charity, have a really, really great website where you can find your nearest toad crossing. So if you go in and put in where you live, I've put in my town here, Tamworth, it comes up with a map and it shows you your nearest crossing, like historical one that's been noted. So it lists those and categorizes those into ones that have an active patrol group, so already a gang of volunteers cover that, and ones that are noted crossings but don't have anybody covering it with a bucket and a torch. So you can either go and join an existing group if you feel more comfortable with other people, or you can even look at setting up your own if there's one quite local. And it's a really, really satisfying thing to do. You can really, really note the difference. You can measure each year how many toads that you get, and you can see if you're hopefully contributing to their conservation. And yeah, so that's it. That's Toad Patrol. I highly recommend having a look at either of their websites as well. But I've got a couple of minutes left now, so I don't know if anybody's got any questions. Again, I'm looking tiny on my phone here, so I'm going to just get really close and personal. Kevin has asked, do toads just head to ponds, or do they also head to big rivers? Now, they don't breed in rivers that I know of, because rivers are obviously quite flowing and moving water. They tend to like still water. Now, the population I go to there's a really big farmer's pond. It's a beautiful pond. And then there's a road. And on the other side of the road, there's a small little pool that a brook flows into. And the toads migrate all the way up this brook. So although a lot of them pass through the forest behind the brook, a lot of them will just jump into the brook and then swim up it. So they do use flowing bodies of water to use to kind of transport themselves up, if that makes sense. A bit like salmon. Like salmon go up the river, a bit like that. So you can be looking at night with your torch and you can just see all these little faces poking out in the water coming towards you. They like crawl along on the brook bed. They're amazing. And somebody else is saying, oh, love slow worms. Stop rubbing it in just because I'm missing one. Yeah, I've never seen one. So yeah, that's it. That's the Warty Diaries, all about toads. I hope you've enjoyed. And like I said, check out both of those partners' websites. They're absolutely brilliant. And perhaps think about setting up for toad patrol of your own next year. Wildlife Louie, definitely going to get involved with toad patrols when this is all over. Do it. It's great. It's really cool. Yeah, it's just a really good feel-good thing. And like I said, you're getting a bit of exercise. You're outside in spring. You hear like tawny owls and see bats. It's really cool. So it's worth it. So thanks for listening. If anyone's got any more questions afterwards or wants to just nerd out about toads, I'm on Instagram and Twitter as Lucy Lapwing. So give me a shout. Thanks very much. Oh, and thank you, Roxy, for hosting me as well. Most importantly, she's doing a great job. I think on soon is who's on next? Is it Bug Boy? I think so. Yeah, take a look. There's some absolutely brilliant people coming up on Roxy's channel, so watch those as well. Thanks very much. Goodbye.